Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we take a stack of sources, articles, systematic reviews, clinical trials, and distill it down to the essential, actionable knowledge you need. Today, we are turning our analytical lens onto a global staple, a food that is seemingly simple, but hides a fascinating amount of scientific complexity. We're talking about the humble chickpea, often known as the garbanzo bean.
Yeah, exactly. Chickpeas are woven into the fabric of human diets across continents, from the Mediterranean to South Asia, and I think everyone just assumes they're healthy. But in the world of nutrition, assumptions don't really count for much.
Right.
Our mission today is to cut through all the noise, the wellness blogs, the anecdotal stories, the wishful thinking, and ask, what does the most rigorous human clinical research, specifically randomized controlled trials or RCTs, and high-quality meta-analyses actually say about their tangible, measurable health benefits?
And we've spent the time sifting through dozens of human trials and multiple systematic reviews. We're not looking for mere observational correlation. We want causation and really quantifiable effects. Our goal is to provide the definitive, evidence-centered breakdown of cisareatinum for you, the curious learner.
And to do that, we are setting a very high standard. We're going to be focusing entirely on evidence strength. So when we discuss a benefit, we'll be citing only high-quality studies and then providing the certainty we have in that finding using the internationally recognized standard, the GRADE system ratings.
So that's high, moderate, low, or very low.
Exactly. And most importantly, we will give you the precise quantitative details, the specific data points, like how much your LDL drops or the exact measurement of how flat your glucose curve becomes. This deep dive is designed to synthesize what is definitively known about both the acute, immediate effects and the long-term, chronic effects on cardiometabolic health, weight, and even potential longevity pathways.
Okay, so let's unpack this starting with the foundational science. Why is the chickpea so frequently implicated in these, impressive health discussions? Because nutritionally, it is a tiny, densely packed powerhouse. It's not just bulk, it's a specific matrix of components that scientists believe drive the physiological effects we see in the clinical trials.
That's the perfect place to start. If we look at the core identity of the chickpea, using the standard approximation of 100 grams of cooked chickpeas, which is, roughly half a cup, we're looking at about 164 kilocalories. But the way those calories are structured is really what matters.
Give us the macro breakdown first. What is it delivering in terms of protein and carbohydrates?
For protein, you're getting around 8.9 grams per 100 grams cooked. That's a pretty substantial contribution for a plant-based food source, making it excellent for satiety and muscle maintenance. Now, we need to add some crucial context here for anyone building a plant-based diet. Chickpea protein is high in the essential amino acid lysine, which is often the limiting factor in most grains, like wheat or corn.
So if you pair chickpeas with, say, a rice dish, or even an enriched pasta, they complement each other beautifully. They're essentially creating a complete protein profile.
Precisely. However, the caveat is that they are limiting in the sulfur-containing amino acids methionine and cysteine, and this is a really critical detail. For someone relying heavily on legumes as their sole protein source, they have to ensure they get these other amino acids from somewhere else, typically nuts, seeds, or grains.
It just highlights the importance of dietary diversity, even within a single meal.
Exactly.
Moving to the carbohydrates. Total carbs clock in at about 27.4 grams, but the fiber story is probably the most compelling aspect of that 27 grams.
Absolutely. The fiber component is huge, 7.6 grams of dietary fiber. To put that in perspective, that's about a quarter of your recommended daily intake in just a single serving. And buried within the starch profile is a unique component that is central to the chickpea's metabolic power, resistant starch, or RS.
How much RS are we talking about, and why is this particular starch so important?
You're looking at a range of 1.2 to 2.8 grams of resistant starch per 100 gram. It depends heavily on the preparation, specifically how much it was cooked and then subsequently cooled. And the name says it all. It resists digestion in the stomach and small intestine, so it acts functionally like a fermentable fiber.
Okay.
This RS is key because it passes through to the colon where it becomes food for the beneficial gut bacteria, initiating all the prebiotic effects we'll discuss later.
So it's not digested into glucose immediately like a refined carb would be. It's being fed to the colon. That's a huge biological difference.
It fundamentally changes the metabolic equation of the entire meal.
Right.
And we haven't even touched the micronutrients yet. They're incredibly dense. They're remarkably high in folate, delivering around 172 micrograms per 100 grams, which is about 43% of the daily value. And folate is just essential for DNA synthesis and repair.
And the mineral profile is
Yeah.
equally impressive, right?
Oh, yeah. You also get significant levels of iron, around 2.9 milligrams, magnesium, around 48 milligrams, and potassium, about 291 milligrams. These minerals are essential cofactors, especially magnesium and potassium, which are critical for nerve function, muscle health, and crucially, blood pressure regulation.
Okay, here is where the deep dive gets really detailed. The bioactive compounds beyond the standard nutritional label. We're talking about components that aren't just fuel or cofactors, but that actively interfere with biological processes in a beneficial way. What are the heavy hitters that give chickpeas their medicinal-like qualities?
We can categorize them into two main groups. First, the lipid-related compounds, saponins and phytosterols, which include molecules like vasitosterol.
So they're like blockers for fat absorption.
Exactly. They structurally resemble cholesterol. So when they're in your small intestine, they essentially compete with dietary and bile-derived cholesterol for incorporation into these structures called micelles, which are necessary for absorption.
So they just get in the way.
They compete for space, and by doing that, they reduce the amount of cholesterol the body can absorb, which is a key mechanism for the LDL lowering we'll detail later.
Okay, what about the second group?
The second group is the potent antioxidant brigade, polyphenols. These include various isoflavones like biotin A and formononetin. These are powerful compounds, but it's crucial to note where they're concentrated, often in the darker seed coats. They work to reduce oxidative stress and inflammation throughout the body.
That concentration in the coat leads us directly to a fascinating and actionable detail. The varietal differences. I mean, most people just buy a can labeled chickpeas, but they're fundamentally different types with different compositions. Desi versus kabuli.
This is a major insight for our listener. The two main types have really distinct physical and chemical compositions. Kabuli chickpeas are the ones most common in Western markets. They're larger, rounder, paler in color, and have that smooth texture that's ideal for hummus. They often have slightly higher protein levels when measured by dry weight.
And the Desi variety. This sounds like it might be the superior option based purely on what you just said about seed coats and polyphenols.
You're right on track. Desi are the traditional variety. They're smaller, irregularly shaped, often darker, and they dominate in South Asian cuisine where they're split and used as chana dal. They have a much thicker, rougher, and more pigmented seed coat.
Yeah.
And this thick coat means they have higher total dietary fiber and, critically, 2 to 3 times the total polyphenol content compared to kabuli.
Wait, okay, if the Desi variety is clearly superior in fiber and polyphenols, why are we all wasting our time with kabuli for our everyday hummus? Is this just a market preference thing? Because based on what you're saying, Desi should deliver a superior metabolic punch.
That's a great critical question, and it really speaks to market and consumer preference for aesthetics, the smooth, pale hummus look and texture. But you're right, the physical structure of that thick Desi seed coat contributes to a significantly lower glycemic index GI, typically ranging from 10 to 28, versus the GI of 28 to 32 for the thinner-skinned kabuli types. So theoretically.
Theoretically based purely on compositional science, more fiber, more polyphenols, lower GI Desi should be superior for overall metabolic health markers.
But have the high-quality human trials actually confirmed that superiority? Has any RCT actually compared eating Desi versus kabuli for, say, 3 months and looked at the outcomes?
And here is a critical gap, exactly as you suspected. Clinical trials have not systematically compared these two varieties head-to-head for measurable health outcomes like LDL or HbA1c yet. So while the mechanistic data strongly favors Desi for its structural integrity and antioxidant potential, when we talk about proven clinical benefits, we can only confirm the general benefits of cisaretinum based on the pulse meta-analyses, which often use unspecified or mixed varieties.
A huge area for future research, then.
For sure.
Okay, let's move out of the lab and into the clinic. When we look at the evidence pyramid, the randomized controlled trials and meta-analyses, where is the certainty the highest? Where do chickpeas shine the brightest and most consistently? Without a doubt, that would be in the realm of cardiometabolic health, specifically glycemic control and lipid management. This is where the evidence strength is rated moderate to strong, meaning we have high confidence in the direction and the size of the effect.
Let's start with the one that affects the greatest number of people globally, blood sugar control. What does the stack tell us about the core finding regarding glucose regulation?
The core finding is that chickpea consumption exerts a modest but absolutely clinically useful glucoregulatory benefit. They are fundamentally a low GI food, and multiple RCTs and subsequent meta-analyses all support this.
Okay, so give us the acute data first. What happens in the hours immediately after you eat a meal where you've replaced a refined starch with chickpeas?
Meta-analyses of acute RCTs, where chickpea consumption is compared head-to-head against carbohydrate-matched control meals, and this is the gold standard for isolating the food's effects, show a significant reduction in the postprandial glucose incremental area under the curve, or IAUC.
We need to pause there. For our listener, we use that term, IEUC, a lot. Why is measuring the area under the curve better than just measuring the peak glucose spike?
That's an essential distinction. The IAUC metric doesn't just measure the highest point of the glucose spike. It measures the total amount of time and total concentration of glucose your body is exposed to after the meal.
This is a cumulative measure.
It's a cumulative measure of blood sugar load. High prolonged IAUC is what drives negative long-term consequences, damaging blood vessels and contributing to insulin resistance. A flatter curve and a smaller area means less physiological stress.
And the number here is substantial. This is the quantifiable effect that people need to grasp.
It truly is. The average reduction in glucose IAUC is around -47.89 milli-GDL-min, compared to control meals like white bread or potatoes. For an individual, especially one who is normoglycemic, this translates to dampening the glucose spike by more than 1 millimole per liter.
Wow.
And we see this powerful effect even when the available carbohydrate, or AVC show, content is matched between the test meal and the control meal.
So the benefit isn't just because the chickpea has less easily digestible sugar. It's an intrinsic, powerful glucoregulatory effect that is structure-driven.
Exactly. That is the aha moment that food scientists rave about. The benefit is driven by the physical structure and the complex mix of fiber and bioactive compounds, not simply the caloric or carb count. The chickpea actively slows down digestion compared to its refined starch equivalent.
Okay, now let's look long-term. What happens when people with established type 2 diabetes or prediabetes consistently include pulses in their diet over several months?
The long-term data comes from major pulse intervention trials where participants consumed roughly one serving, about 130-190 grams per day, for 3 months or more. And this regular consumption consistently resulted in positive changes. We see a significant reduction in fasting glucose levels, and crucially, a reduction in HbA1c, which is the 3-month average blood sugar marker.
How significant are those HbA1c numbers?
Trials observed a clinically meaningful reduction in HbA1c ranging from mater 0.16% to mitigure 0.5%.
That's a big deal.
It is. To put that into perspective, for a patient actively managing type 2 diabetes, a drop of that magnitude is comparable to some oral diabetes medications and is highly significant for long-term prognosis and reducing the risk of complications.
So let's focus on how the mechanisms observed in humans that explain this powerful, structure-driven effect.
The primary mechanism, which you hinted at, is the cellular integrity advantage. Starch digestion is slowed dramatically because the carbohydrates are literally encapsulated, they're physically locked, within the intact cell wall structure of the whole chickpea.
It's like a tiny digestive barrier.
Exactly. Your digestive enzymes have to work much harder and take much longer to breach that physical barrier and access the starch within.
It's like eating the contents of a Mylar balloon versus just eating the powder. One requires a lot more effort to access the nutrient payload.
That's a perfect analogy. And this is why preserving that cell structure is so important. When food science researchers create products using chickpea flour, they find that creating cellular chickpea flour, so less fine milling, where the cell walls are largely preserved, is vastly superior for glycemic control compared to highly processed fine flour, which just rips those protective walls apart.
What about the hormonal response to this slow release?
That slow, steady trickle of nutrients into the bloodstream has a huge beneficial ripple effect on the gut hormones that govern metabolism and appetite. Human RCTs show an increased release of satiety and insulin-modulating hormones when chickpeas displace refined grains. Specifically, acute consumption of chickpea flour-enriched bread increased the release of GLP-1, that's glucagon-like peptide 1, by a whopping plus 35% AUC.
Wow, a 35% boost in GLP-1. That is significant. That's the appetite regulation hormone everyone is talking about right now, the one targeted by new weight loss drugs.
Exactly. And it also significantly increased PYY, or peptide YY, by plus 28% AUC. These two hormones are key. GLP-1 enhances insulin secretion and slows gastric emptying, thereby helping regulate glucose. And PYY signals profound satiety to the brain.
So there's a direct connection between the glucose benefits and appetite control.
A direct hormonal link.
Okay, stepping back from glucose mechanisms, let's turn to lipids. The cholesterol-lowering effects of pulses are incredibly well documented, but we need the hard numbers. What's the quantitative evidence here for LDL reduction?
The evidence is highly robust, supported by multiple RCT meta-analyses like the major analysis published in the CMAJ back in 2014, which reviewed 26 trials. The evidence strength here is rated moderate, so we have high confidence in the finding.
What is the specific effect size the listener can expect? How much of a drop are we talking about?
Regular consumption of pulses results in a small but consistent and clinically meaningful reduction in LDL cholesterol, the bad cholesterol. The mean difference observed across multiple high-quality trials is about 0.17 millimole.
Okay, and in U.S. units?
That's approximately 7.9 milli-GDL. This represents about a 4% to 5% reduction from baseline LDL levels.
A 4 to 5% reduction in LDL achieved purely through incorporating a simple food item like chickpeas into the diet. That's incredibly significant. I mean, that's roughly the effect of a first-line therapy for someone with moderate cholesterol. We're talking about a measurable clinical effect just from a cup of chickpeas a day.
It is. It's precisely the cumulative power of diet over time. It shows that chickpea is a potent dietary tool. This effect is reliably observed at a median dose of roughly 130 grams of cooked pulses per day, which is about 1 standard serving, consumed consistently over a period of about 6 weeks.
And total cholesterol drops, too.
Yes. We also see total cholesterol dropping consistently by about 0.22 millimole.
So what is the primary mechanism driving this consistent LDL reduction? Is it the same as the glycemic control?
Not entirely. While the structural integrity helps, the primary driver for LDL reduction is the high content of soluble fiber. You can think of that soluble fiber as kind of a sticky flypaper in your gut. As the soluble fiber forms a viscous gel, it effectively binds to bile acids, which are cholesterol-derived compounds the liver secretes to help digest fats.
And when those bile acids are bound up by the sticky fiber?
They're physically escorted out of the body through the stool rather than being recycled back to the liver.
Got it.
This forces the liver to use circulating cholesterol to synthesize new bile acids to restock its supply. This process, in turn, upregulates LDL receptors on the surface of liver cells, which dramatically increases the rate at which the liver pulls LDL cholesterol out of the bloodstream.
So it's a systematic push and pull mechanism, pushing out bile acids, which forces the liver to pull in more circulating cholesterol.
Exactly. And we also have secondary mechanisms contributing, like the displacement of less healthy fats when you swap them in, and of course the direct competition from those phytosterols we discussed earlier, which further inhibit cholesterol absorption.
Are certain populations more responsive to this cholesterol drop?
Yes. The data suggests that individuals starting with higher baseline cholesterol, specifically those with total cholesterol greater than 5.5 millimole, tend to see a greater magnitude of LDL reduction. This makes chickpeas a particularly effective, targeted dietary tool for people actively managing hypercholesterolemia.
Okay, the third key cardiometabolic marker, blood pressure. Do chickpeas offer demonstrable antihypertensive effects?
The signals are certainly there, but they are winter and less consistent than the profound effects we see on glucose and lipids, hence the rating of low to moderate strength. Meta-analyses of controlled feeding trials that substitute pulses for other foods do report small positive reductions in systolic blood pressure, SBP, averaging approximately 2.25 mmHg.
Is that a clinically meaningful drop, or is it more of a statistical footnote?
It's modest, but it is statistically significant. And when looking specifically at dedicated chickpea trials, some have shown drops up to -4.7 mmHg in SBP over 12 weeks.
Okay, that's definitely clinically relevant.
For sure, especially as part of a broader dietary approach.
So what's driving this small beneficial effect if the structural integrity mechanisms are focused more on glucose and lipids?
It's likely multifactorial, leveraging mineral content. The high levels of potassium and magnesium are essential for regulating fluid balance and relaxing blood vessel walls. Secondly, the fiber improves general endothelial function, that's the health of the inner lining of your blood vessels. And thirdly, just general improvements in insulin sensitivity and modest weight management, which we'll cover next, all contribute to a small but positive drop in systemic blood pressure. It's a cumulative effect of several small mechanisms working together.
We've established the strong evidence for improving metabolic markers in the blood. Now, let's transition and look at how chickpeas affect the human experience. how we feel, specifically in terms of fullness, weight management, and the health of our complex gut ecosystem.
The evidence connecting chickpeas to appetite control is quite strong, rated moderate, and the mechanism is clear, rooted directly in what we just discussed. It's the synergistic effect of high protein, high fiber, and that massive stimulation of key satiety hormones, PYY and GLP-1.
So that hormonal surge translates directly into how much we eat later in the day.
Absolutely. Acute trials show a significant increase in satiety scores, up to a plus 14% increase in visual analog scale scores compared to controls. And this isn't just a subjective feeling, it translates directly into energy reduction. We see a measurable reduction in subsequent food intake, up to a negative 12% reduction in energy intake at the very next meal.
That's significant.
It is. When the body's releasing 35% more GLP-1, it is literally telling the brain to stop eating.
So does that immediate, acute reduction in intake translate into meaningful long-term weight management? Because that's really the gold standard for lifestyle change.
Modestly, yes. RCT meta-analyses, which reviewed consistent consumption lasting 3 weeks or more, found that regular pulse consumption at a median of 132 edition led to a modest reduction in body weight. It averaged about near 0.34 kilograms over the trial period.
Wait, that's key. A third of a kilogram loss, even without deliberate caloric restriction.
Precisely. Just making the simple swap replacing a refined starch with chickpeas is enough to move the needle slightly. It is a passive, measurable benefit achieved simply by lowering the overall energy density of the diet and significantly boosting satiety hormones, leading to an unconscious reduction in overall caloric consumption.
And I assume it's even better if you are trying to restrict calories.
Of course. The effect is more pronounced within energy-restricted diets, where the inclusion of pulses led to a loss of approximately minus 1.1 kilograms more than the control diet.
So the practical takeaway here is clear. This isn't some miraculous weight loss pill, but it provides a gentle, consistent, passive benefit that reinforces any active effort someone is making to manage their weight.
Exactly.
Okay, moving to the gut. We can confidently state that chickpeas function as powerful prebiotics.
Oh, absolutely. The resistant starch and the specific types of oligosaccharides found in legumes, like raffinose and stachiotes, pass undigested into the large intestine, where they act as fermentable substrates for the colon.
What does the research show happens to our actual gut bacteria composition when we consistently consume chickpeas?
Small crossover RCTs, using doses like 200 grams per day, show clear changes in fecal microbial composition. They act like a highly specialized fertilizer, specifically promoting an increase in beneficial bacteria. We see significant increases in key health players, like Faecalibacterium prausnitzii.
Why is F. prausnitzii so important? That's a name that keeps coming up in gut health research.
F. prausnitzii is one of the most abundant and important commensal bacteria in a healthy colon. It's highly associated with maintaining gut barrier function and reducing inflammation systemically. We also see definite trends toward increasing bifidobacterium, with some trials showing up to a 2.4-fold increase in fiber extract trials. These are all signs of a healthier, more diverse gut environment.
And the fermentation process of those specific starches yields the vital short-chain fatty acids, right?
Correct. This fermentation increases beneficial short-chain fatty acids, or SCFAs, primarily butyrate, acetate, and propionate. Butyrate, in particular, is critical because it's the main energy source for the cells lining the colon, the colonocytes. This not only keeps the colon healthy, but plays a role in regulating inflammation and immune response throughout the whole body.
Okay, let's confront the elephant in the room that stops many people from eating more chickpeas.
Yeah.
The gastrointestinal discomfort.
The gas. We absolutely must address the adaptation period. Let's be honest, the first couple of weeks can be challenging, a period we might call the flatulence frontier. Initial flatulence, bloating, and abdominal discomfort are common, and they're caused by the fermentation of those gas-producing oligosaccharides that we lack the enzymes to digest higher up.
So the listener needs to know if they need to just power through this. Does it get better?
The science says yes, because the symptoms are usually transient. Trials confirm this.
Right.
About 35% of participants report symptoms initially. But the crucial insight for the listener is that these symptoms usually resolve significantly by week 3 or 4 as the gut microbiota adapts to the new increased substrate.
So your gut bacteria literally learn how to handle it better.
Exactly. Your gut bacteria population literally shifts and optimizes itself to handle the food, becoming more efficient and less gas-producing. It just requires patience and a gradual introduction.
We've established the benefits where the evidence is concrete: the heart, the blood sugar, and the gut. Here's where the evidence starts to thin out a bit. We're moving from the proven benefits, which have moderate certainty, to the observational associations and mechanistic pathways where we have lower confidence.
We must clarify the limitation first with absolute transparency. There are no RCTs that can prove chickpeas increase lifespan directly. That would require a century-long unethical trial design.
Right. Impossible.
So all reliable evidence comes from large prospective cohort studies, which are observational in nature.
What does that observational data associate with pulse consumption?
Meta-analyses combining massive amounts of data from over 1 million participants consistently show that higher legume intake is statistically associated with a lower risk of all-cause mortality. Specifically, the aggregated data shows that each additional 50 grams per day of legume intake, that's about a quarter cup, is associated with approximately 6% lower all-cause mortality. The hazard ratio is 0.94.
That 6% drop is a compelling association. But why do we still grade this evidence? Low to moderate? Why not higher?
Because of the critical issue of confounding factors, often called the healthy user bias, we can't definitively say the chickpeas cause the outcome, only that they are associated with it.
Meaning people who eat chickpeas might just be healthier in general.
Exactly. People who eat pulses frequently generally follow healthier overall lifestyles. They exercise more, smoke less, eat more vegetables, and have better access to healthcare. Therefore, the longevity benefit is largely inferred from the consistent, proven improvements they deliver in those intermediate cardiometabolic markers we covered, LDL, glucose, and blood pressure, which do lead to longer, healthier lives.
So if you eat a cup of chickpeas every day, you are more likely to live longer, both because the chickpeas are inherently good for your body and because your diet and lifestyle are already aligned with better health.
That's the perfect summary. It's a signal that confirms chickpeas belong in a health-promoting diet, even if we can't isolate them as the single cause of increased longevity.
Okay, this is a massive area of interest right now. The gut-brain axis. Is there a measurable mood boost or cognitive lift in a bowl of hummus?
Directly, no. The certainty rating here is very low and sufficient because there are essentially no direct, high-quality RCTs that isolate chickpea consumption and measure clinical psychological outcomes like depression, anxiety, or specific cognitive functions.
That is surprising, given how powerful the gut-brain connection is becoming. We know chickpeas modulate the gut, so what are the plausible indirect pathways that might suggest a benefit?
The potential lies in 3 strong indirect pathways that researchers are currently exploring.
Okay, pathway 1. The immediate effect on energy levels.
Glycemic stability. The constant blood glucose spikes and crashes that come from eating highly refined carbohydrates are known mood and energy destabilizers. By slowing carbohydrate absorption and preventing those large post-meal glucose surges, chickpeas can promote more stable mood and reduce fatigue, often associated with glycemic dysregulation.
Makes sense. Pathway 2. The nutrient content. We mentioned the folate and magnesium earlier. Why are those minerals so key to mood?
They're absolutely central to the brain's chemistry. Chickpeas are rich in folate, 43% DV, and magnesium. These are essential cofactors for synthesizing crucial monoamine neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, which are critical for mood regulation, stress response, and focus. If you're deficient in these cofactors, your brain literally can't manufacture enough happy chemicals.
So it's providing the raw materials.
It ensures the raw materials are there.
And pathway 3, connecting the gut changes back to the brain.
This is the most exciting theoretical area, the gut-brain axis. We established that chickpea fermentation increases short-chain fatty acids like butyrate. SCFAs are powerful signaling molecules that can influence the integrity of the blood-brain barrier and are mechanistically linked to reducing systemic and neuroinflammation.
And we know inflammation is linked to depression.
Exactly. Chronic low-grade inflammation is now strongly implicated in depression and anxiety. So while chickpea consumption increases the anti-inflammatory environment in the gut, this mechanism could indirectly contribute to better mood, but this remains unproven specifically for chickpeas in clinical trials.
So we have the ingredients and the plausible mechanisms for a benefit, but no direct clinical recipe validation yet. We can't say, eat chickpeas, cure anxiety.
Correct. And we have to be honest, secondary analysis of the few RCTs that have included cognitive tests like the trail making and digit span test showed no significant difference on immediate cognitive measures. So we just don't have sufficient evidence for cognitive benefits yet. It's a frontier waiting for high quality, targeted research.
So we've reviewed the hard evidence and the promising frontier. What does all this data mean for the listener? How do they practically apply this knowledge to get those proven benefits efficiently and safely in their daily life.
Providing clear, actionable numbers based on the research is essential for moving from theory to practice.
Let's start with the acute, short-term benefits, like dampening that post-meal glucose spike. What's the dose?
For acute glycemic control, a single serving equivalent to between 75 and 150 grams of cooked chickpeas is effective when replacing refined starches. Or if you're using chickpea flour in baking, using bread containing 30–60% chickpea flour is enough to significantly improve the glycemic response to that product.
And for those crucial chronic cumulative benefits, the LDL cholesterol drop, the consistent HbA1c reduction, and the passive weight loss, what is the optimal daily target derived from the successful trials?
For the chronic metabolic benefits, the consistent dose used in successful trials that saw those measurable changes in LDL, HbA1c, and weight was approximately 1 serving daily, or specifically about 130 grams of cooked pulses per day.
And for how long?
These trials typically lasted 6 to 12 weeks to see those sustained measurable changes. Consistency is absolutely the key.
And we keep reinforcing the format. If the benefit is driven by that cellular integrity, which form is best for preserving the metabolic benefits?
You should prioritize formats that keep the cell walls intact. So whole cooked chickpeas, whether boiled at home or from a can and cellular chickpea flour, meaning less fine, less processed milling, tend to give superior glycemic and gut hormone effects because they preserve that crucial cell integrity that slows digestion.
So more processed isn't better.
Definitely not. Finely milled, highly processed flours can diminish these properties, essentially breaking down that digestive barrier before the food even enters your body.
Okay, a major criticism often levied against legumes is the presence of antinutrients, like phytates, which can modestly reduce the absorption of important minerals like iron and zinc. What are the best preparation methods to enhance the good stuff and minimize these minor drawbacks?
Preparation is paramount for maximizing nutrient bioavailability. The good news is that traditional cooking methods are scientifically sound. Soaking dried chickpeas for 12 to 24 hours, sprouting or germination, and fermentation processes all significantly reduce antinutrients like phytates by up to 50 to 70%.
So the first step is key.
Soaking dried chickpeas and discarding the water is a core, non-negotiable recommendation for home cooks.
What about mineral absorption, especially non-heme iron, which is less bioavailable than animal sources?
We have a powerful intervention here, pairing with vitamin C-rich foods. Ascorbic acid is a massive enhancer of non-heme iron absorption. It overcomes that phytate inhibition. So consuming chickpeas alongside foods like tomatoes in a curry, bell peppers in a salad, or a squeeze of lemon on your hummus is scientifically proven to increase non-heme iron absorption up to a massive 2.6-fold.
Wow, 2.6 times. That's huge.
It is. This pairing strategy is absolutely essential for optimal nutrient uptake.
And what preparation steps should the listener avoid if they want to maximize the metabolic punch?
You should avoid excessive fine milling if you're processing them into flours, as we discussed, because it degrades the cellular integrity. Similarly, excessive overcooking can reduce the beneficial slow digestion properties and may leach some water-soluble nutrients like folate and polyphenols into the cooking water if you don't use that water.
Finally, let's close with the safety profile. The overall evidence suggests a very high safety rating for chickpeas. What are the specific caution points based on the clinical data?
General safety. Chickpeas are safe for the vast majority of people. We already covered the primary side effect, which is that transient GI discomfort in the first few weeks, which decreases as the gut microbiota adapts. We just encourage gradual introduction to mitigate this.
What about the warfarin interaction? This is often a concern for people on blood thinners who worry about vitamin K intake.
Chickpeas are not a significant source of vitamin K. They contain only about 69 micrograms per 100 gram cooked, which is minimal compared to high K foods like kale or spinach, which can contain hundreds of micrograms.
So not a big risk.
The risk is low. The key for patients on warfarin is just to maintain consistent weekly intake, whether low or high, and always consult their clinician before making major, sudden dietary shifts.
And for individuals managing blood sugar with medication.
Due to the proven glucose-lowering and insulin-sensitizing effects, monitoring is advised if intake is significantly increased, particularly for those on potent drugs like insulin or sulfonylureas. There is a theoretical risk of additive effects, which could lead to enhanced hypoglycemia.
But that's a good problem to have in a way.
It's important to frame this as a positive, yeah. This often signals a successful dietary change that may eventually allow for medication dose reduction under medical supervision.
And the final word on mineral absorption.
The phytates modestly reduce iron and zinc absorption, which absolutely necessitates the preparation strategies, soaking, sprouting, and most effectively, that vitamin C pairing to ensure optimal nutrient uptake, particularly in plant-based diets.
This has been an incredibly rigorous deep dive into the absolute best evidence we have on the humble chickpea. Let's do a quick recap of the main takeaways that should stick with you. The strongest evidence, the moderate to strong certainty, is for daily consumption, aimed at replacing energy-dense, refined carbohydrates.
The core actionable target is aiming for about 130 to 150 grams of cooked chickpeas daily. Doing this consistently can lead to a measurable drop in LDL cholesterol, that crucial 4 to 5% reduction, and significantly improve your post-meal blood sugar response, potentially leading to an HbA1c drop of up to 0.5% in diabetic patients over a few months.
It's the definition of food as medicine.
It really is.
So we know what works. But as always with science, there are major gaps, and identifying them is crucial for the curious learner. If you're looking ahead, what are the 3 biggest unknown frontiers right now that need research?
First, the absolute lack of direct controlled RCTs testing chickpeas specifically for mental health or cognition outcomes. We have compelling, plausible pathways via the gut-brain axis and essential nutrient delivery, but just no clinical validation. Second, we desperately need longer RCTs, lasting over 6 months or even a year, to test hard clinical outcomes like sustained significant weight loss or actual CVD event reduction, rather than relying solely on intermediate markers like LDL.
And the third gap, which we highlighted early on, related to optimizing your purchase.
The lack of head-to-head comparative RCTs between the 2 main varieties, Desi versus Kabuli. Compositionally, Desi looks superior for fiber, polyphenols, and GI, but without the human trial evidence, we can't definitively tell the listener to ditch the Kabuli and seek out the Desi for specific health benefits.
That brings us to our final provocative thought for you to explore as you move forward. Given that the profound metabolic benefits of the chickpea largely come from the whole food matrix, the precise combination of fiber, protein-resistant starch, and especially that concept of cellular integrity that naturally slows digestion, how might the food industry better design processed chickpea products? Think flours, pastas, snacks, or even protein isolates to deliberately preserve that essential physical structure.
How do innovators ensure that their convenient, highly processed product still delivers the maximum metabolic punch we see in the whole, slow-cooked bean? The challenge is to preserve that physical cell wall integrity because we know from the research that structural barrier is the key to slowing the glucose delivery and unlocking the full health benefit.
A challenge that could revolutionize the refined carbohydrate aisle and make healthy eating significantly easier. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the science of the staple. We'll see you next time.